This is the story of a woman who was told she didn't belong. It's the story of a warrior who thought no one could ever match him. They were from two different worlds, two different peoples, sworn enemies in a land that was bleeding. But when the outcast woman stood before the legendary warrior, she spoke five simple words that would ignite a fire so hot, it would either forge a new future or burn everything they both loved to the ground. This isn't just a love story. It's a story about what happens when courage meets tradition head on. The Arizona sun was a hammer, beating down on the dust of the Apache settlement. Today was the day of the trials. For 3 moons, the stories had spread like a fever. Cochise, the greatest warrior of the Chiricahua people, was seeking a mate. His name meant strength of oak, and at 32 he was a living legend. His body was a roadmap of battles fought and won, muscles carved from a life of war in a land that showed no mercy. War paint cut across his bronze skin in sharp geometric lines, each one telling a story of victory. Eagle feathers in his long black hair danced in the hot desert wind. He was power. He was the Apache spirit made flesh, and his trials were impossible. The sacred circle of stones had been prepared. The Apache believed only a woman of impossible strength could bear the children of their greatest warrior. Only a woman forged in the same fires as him could stand by his side. They had come from all over, drawn by the legend of Cuchis, each believing she was the one. Each one was wrong. Another one comes, Nalish grunted. He was Cuchis's closest friend, a warrior almost as feared as Cuchis himself. He nodded toward the edge of the settlement. A young woman named Ayana walked forward. She was beautiful, with the high cheekbones and fierce eyes of her people, her black hair heavy with silver ornaments. The crowd went silent as Cuchis stepped into the circle. The world itself seemed to hold its breath. His eyes, dark and sharp as obsidian chips, sized her up. "You seek to prove yourself," his voice rolled across the clearing, deep and low like distant thunder. "The trials will test your body. They will break your spirit. Many have failed." Ayana lifted her chin. "I am the daughter of Running Bear. My blood is the blood of warriors." The first trial was endurance. Simple, brutal. Ayana had to carry heavy water vessels across the unforgiving rocks. Cuchis ran beside her, his long legs eating the ground, his breathing steady and calm. For an hour she fought to keep up. Sweat poured down her face. Her arms screamed. The heavy clay pots felt like they were pulling her down into the earth itself. "Your breathing is weak," Cuchis said, his voice flat without pity. "A warrior's mate must endure what would kill lesser women." Ayana's steps faltered. The vessel slipped. She stumbled, and then she fell. The water, more precious than gold in this land, spilled into the thirsty dust. The crowd sighed, a collective whisper of disappointment. Cuchis helped her up, his touch surprisingly gentle. "You have heart," he said softly, "but heart is not enough." As the sun bled crimson and amber across the western mountains, another woman stepped forward. Her name was Itel. She was from a distant band, known for her skill with horses and her burning ambition. She was tall and lean, with eyes that flashed like lightning. "I will not fail," she declared, her voice sharp and clear. "I have trained my whole life for this." The second trial was combat, not to kill, but to prove skill, to prove tactical genius. Cuchis moved like smoke. His every motion was a perfect, deadly dance. Etel was good. Her knife was a blur, but she was fighting a storm. Within moments, she was on her back, disarmed, his powerful body pinning her to the ground. He held her wrists above her head, his dark eyes boring into hers. His breathing was barely even heavy. "You have skill," he said, his voice a low rumble that was almost intimate. "But you do not have the fire to match mine." He let her go and helped her up. It was a gesture of respect, but everyone knew what it meant. She had failed. Another one broken against his impossible standards. The twilight deepened. Torches were lit, their flames licking at the darkness. And then a sound rippled through the crowd, a murmur of shock, of disbelief, of anger. From the shadows beyond the firelight, a figure emerged, a woman, but not an Apache woman. Grace Morrison walked into the flickering light. At 24, she was caught between two worlds. Her own people, the white settlers, had cast her out. The Apache, whose language she spoke, whose ways she had learned to survive, did not want her. She was beautiful, but it was a strange, wild beauty. Her hair wasn't black, but the color of fire, a cascade of auburn waves that caught the torchlight. Her eyes weren't dark, but a startling green, deep and knowing. Her skin was tanned by the sun, telling the story of 1,000 days spent surviving in a world that wanted her dead. She wore a simple buckskin dress, practical for movement, and silver jewelry she'd traded for. The reaction was instant, and it was hostile. "What is she doing here?" The whispers were in rapid Apache, sharp and angry. "A white woman, in the sacred circle. This is an insult to our ancestors." Kuchis raised a hand. Silence fell like a stone. His eyes locked on Grace, and his gaze was so intense, it felt like it could strip the flesh from her bones and see right into her soul. For a long, crackling moment, no one moved. No one spoke. The only sound was the spitting of the torches. "You do not belong here," he said finally. His voice was a flat, hard thing. "These trials are for the women of the people." Grace didn't flinch. She stepped forward, right to the edge of the stone circle, her chin held high. "I have lived among your people for 8 months," she replied. Her Apache was fluent, though the rhythm was different, the accent of her birth tongue still there. "I have learned your ways. I have respected your customs. I have survived in this land when my own people would have died." Knowledge stepped forward, his face a mask of contempt. "Survival is not belonging," he spat. "You are Bilagana, White Eyes. Your presence here dishonors this ground." Grace's green eyes flashed. "Your ancestors valued strength," she shot back, her voice ringing with passion. "They valued courage. I have shown both. I have hunted with your warriors. I have tended your wounded. I have asked for nothing. Now I am asking for a chance to prove I am worthy of respect." Kuchis watched her, his expression unreadable, but something was shifting behind his dark eyes. This woman, she was something else. She stood alone, surrounded by the hate of an entire tribe, and she did not bend. She did not break. She did not even seem afraid. "The trials are sacred," he said slowly, testing her. "They are for the mate of a war leader. You are not Apache. Neither was white-painted woman when she first came to you," Grace countered, invoking the name of their most sacred figure, the mother of their heroes. A collective gasp went through the crowd. Several warriors surged forward, their hands on their knives, their faces twisted in rage at her blasphemy. Kuchis held up his hand again, stopping them in their tracks. "You know our stories," he said, and for the first time there was a sliver of respect in his voice. "I know more than stories," Grace said, her voice dropping, becoming more intense. "I know that strength is not about blood. Courage is not about skin. I know that sometimes the greatest warriors are the ones who fight just for a place to call home." The firelight danced on his face. He saw her then, truly saw her. Not as a white woman, not as an intruder. He saw a fighter, a survivor, forged in her own kind of fire. He had been looking for a woman who could match his strength. He had tested their bodies, their skills. But this woman, she was challenging his soul, and it stirred something in him he hadn't felt in a long, long time. "Very well," he said. The words stunned the crowd into silence. He had surprised even himself. "If you believe you are worthy, then step into the circle." He paused, his eyes narrowing. "But know this, I will show you no mercy. You will face the same tests, and if you fail, you will be cast out from this place forever." Without a single moment of hesitation, Grace stepped over the line of stones. Her heart was a drum against her ribs, but her face was a mask of pure determination. The crowd pressed in, their anger now mixed with a burning curiosity. This white woman, this outcast, now stood in the sacred space, facing the most powerful warrior their people had ever known. She had been cast out by her own kind for being too strong, too unwilling to bend to their rules. She had been drawn to the Apache for their freedom, their power. Now she would either earn her place among them, or she would be truly alone, an outcast from every world. Kuchi circled her, moving with the silent, predatory grace of a panther. Tomorrow, he announced, his voice booming across the settlement, when the sun is at its peak, your trial will begin. He stopped in front of her, his shadow falling over her. Tonight, prepare yourself, for I will test you beyond anything you have ever endured. The crowd began to drift away, buzzing with the impossible thing they had just seen. Grace stayed in the circle. In the flickering firelight, she finally felt seen. Not as a stranger, not as an enemy, but as a challenger. The stage was set. A battle was coming that would tear down everything they thought they knew about strength, about honor, and about the lines that are drawn between two people. Dawn bled across the desert sky, a soft watercolor painting of pink and orange. Grace hadn't slept. She had sat by a small fire at the edge of the settlement, a single blanket wrapped around her shoulders, her mind a whirlwind. The hateful whispers of the Apache women had been like insects buzzing in the dark, but she had learned long ago to find strength in being alone. As the sun climbed, the settlement awoke. Coochie's emerged from his lodge, and it was like watching the sun rise a second time. He moved with a disciplined power, a series of stretches that showed the fluid strength in every muscle of his body. He went to the stream to perform his ritual cleansing, and Grace watched from a distance. She saw the way the cool water ran over his bronze shoulders, the way the morning light caught the silver in his long black hair. His every movement was filled with a purpose, a confidence that came from a life without defeat. "You should not stare," a voice said behind her. It was Nalish. His face was hard, but the pure contempt from the night before was gone, replaced by something else. Curiosity, maybe. "It shows weakness to let your thoughts be seen so clearly." Grace turned to face him. "And what thoughts do you see?" Nalish held her gaze. "The same thoughts that have brought down every woman who has faced him. Cooches is not just a man, he is a symbol. It is natural to desire him. It is foolish to believe you can have him." Grace stood up, brushing the dust from her buckskin dress. "I don't want to have anyone," she said. "I want to prove that strength has more than one face." Nalish almost smiled. "We shall see," he said, and there was a new note in his voice. Grudging respect. "The trials begin when the sun is highest. Do not waste the time you have left." As the morning wore on, more people arrived. Word had spread. Apache from other bands came. Warriors and elders, all of them curious to see the white woman who had dared to challenge their greatest champion. The air crackled with tension. When the sun finally reached its zenith, Cooches appeared at the trial ground. He was adorned for the ceremony, with fresh lines of war paint on his cheeks and a necklace of huge bear claws resting on his powerful chest. Silence fell. "Grace Morrison," his voice was formal, booming across the clearing. "You have asked for the right to prove yourself. 3 tests await you, a test of endurance, a test of combat, and a test of spirit. Are you prepared?" Grace stepped into the circle. She wore a simple tunic and leggings, clothing made for movement. Her fiery hair was pulled back in a single braid, and tucked into it was a single eagle feather. Nalish had given it to her that morning, a silent, shocking gesture of something. It wasn't friendship. Not yet. It was an acknowledgement. "I am ready," she said, her voice clear and steady. The first trial was endurance, but not carrying water. For her, Cooches had designed something far worse. "You will run," he announced, "from here to the Red Rocks and back, and you will carry these." He pointed to 2 massive stone weights, each the size of a man's head. "I will run with you. If you fall more than the 50 paces behind me, you have failed." The crowd gasped. This was a trial for a warrior, not a woman. Grace walked to the stones. She bent her knees and lifted them. Her muscles screamed in protest, but she held them firm. "Begin," Cooches commanded. And they ran. The Red Rocks were 2 miles away, across a landscape designed by a cruel god. Loose stones turned ankles. Thorny bushes tore at their legs. Steep inclines made their lungs burn like fire. Grace fought to match his pace. Coochie's ran like a wolf, his stride powerful and effortless. He was a force of nature in his own element. He kept glancing at her, his dark eyes expecting to see her falter, to see her collapse like the others. But she didn't. Her face was red with effort, Sweat soaked her tunic, but her green eyes burned with a fire that seemed to grow hotter with every painful step. When she stumbled, she got back up. When the thorns ripped her skin, she ignored the blood. Your people taught you to endure, Kuchis said as they fought their way up a steep hill. My people taught me that quitting is worse than dying, she gasped, her teeth gritted. They reached the red rocks, massive stone pillars that clawed at the sky. Grace's arms felt like they were being torn from their sockets. Her legs trembled. The weights felt impossibly heavy. We turn back now, Kuchis announced. His own breathing was finally becoming labored. The return journey is the real test. It was worse. The afternoon sun was a physical blow. Grace's strength began to fade. She fell 20 paces behind, then 30. The crowd, following from a distance, began to murmur. She was finished. But then Grace dug deep. She found a reserve she didn't know she had. She drew on every moment of pain from her life, the rejection of her family, the lonely nights in the wilderness, the constant fight to just exist. And somehow she closed the distance, step by agonizing step. She was beside him again. The surprise on Kuchis's face was undeniable. It was more than surprise, it was admiration. As they neared the settlement, her body finally gave out. Her legs tangled and she fell hard. The stones rolled from her grasp. She lay in the dust, gasping for air, every inch of her body screaming. Kuchi stopped and turned. His face was unreadable. The crowd moved closer, certain he was about to declare her failure. Instead, he knelt beside her. You have gone farther than any woman before you, he said, his voice quiet, filled with a strange new respect. Get up. The trial is not over. He offered her his hand. Grace took it, and as their skin touched, a jolt, like lightning, passed between them. It was a spark of something that had nothing to do with the trials. The second test was combat, but again, Kuchis changed the rules for her. Not knives, hand to hand. No weapons, he announced. Strength against strength. Will against will. They faced each other in the circle. The sun was low, casting long, distorted shadows. Grace knew she was at a disadvantage. He was bigger, stronger, a master of combat. I will not hold back because you are a woman, he warned, sinking into a fighting stance. I would not respect you if you did, she shot back. What followed was a brutal, desperate ballet. Kuchis was a whirlwind of controlled violence. His attacks were fast, precise, and powerful. But Grace was a surprise. She couldn't match his strength, so she used her speed, her cunning. She was a desert cat fighting a mountain bear. When he grabbed her, she used his own momentum to throw him off balance. When he struck, she dodged and weaved. It was a chaotic, improvised style born from a life of survival, and it kept her in the fight. You fight like a cat, he grunted during a brief pause, a hint of a smile on his lips. Small but with claws. And you fight like a mountain, she gasped, wiping blood from her split lip. But even mountains can be moved. The end came in a rush. He charged, a wave of unstoppable force. But at the last second, Grace dropped and twisted, sending them both tumbling to the hard-packed earth. She ended up on her back, his muscular body pinning her down, her legs tangled with his. They were both breathing hard, the smell of sweat and blood and dust filling the air. And in that moment, something changed. The trial fell away. All that was left was a man and a woman, predator and prey, an unstoppable force and an immovable object. Their eyes locked. The air crackled. He could have ended it in a second, but he didn't. He found himself looking at her, really looking, at the fire in her green eyes, at the defiant curve of her bloody lips, at the rise and fall of her chest beneath his. Yield, he commanded, but his voice was rough, uncertain. Make me, she whispered back. The crowd watched, stunned into absolute silence. Their legendary warrior, their champion, who had never hesitated, was hesitating now. He was completely captivated by the broken, bleeding, undefeated woman in his grasp. Finally, with a low groan, he pushed himself off her and stood up. His face was a storm of conflicting emotions. The second trial is complete, he announced, his voice hoarse. You have shown courage. As the sun finally touched the horizon, painting the world in shades of fire and blood, it was time for the final trial, the test of spirit, This was the one that truly mattered. This would reveal the soul. Kuchi stood before her, his dark eyes searching hers. "Tell me," he said, "why do you believe you deserve to stand beside the strongest warrior of the Apache? After all the others have failed, what makes you worthy?" Grace stood tall in the center of the circle. Every eye was on her. This was it. "I don't believe I deserve anything," she began, her voice ringing out in the quiet twilight. "Worthiness isn't something you deserve. It's something you earn. It's about what you're willing to sacrifice." She took a deep breath. "I was cast out by my own people because I refused to be what they wanted me to be. I refused to be small. I came to live among the Apache not to take anything from you, but because I saw something I recognized. I saw strength." The crowd was listening now. The hostility was gone, replaced by a tense, focused silence. "I learned your ways not to imitate you, but to understand you," she continued, her eyes never leaving his. "I don't ask you to accept me because of how I look, or because I can survive your trials. I ask you to judge me on my actions, on the fact that I have never ever backed down. I have never asked for mercy, and I have never stopped fighting, even when I knew I couldn't win." She took a step closer to him, her voice dropping, becoming intimate, but every word carried to the furthest listener. "You ask what makes me worthy. I believe it's this. I don't see a legend. I don't see a prize to be won. I see a man of honor. And a man like you doesn't need a woman to walk behind him. He needs a partner to fight beside him, someone who will challenge him, someone who will make him stronger, not just worship the strength he already has." The silence that followed was absolute. The desert itself seemed to be holding its breath. Kuchi stared at her, and in his eyes she saw a universe of emotions. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with a significance that made everyone lean in. "Grace Morrison," he said, "you have completed the 3 trials. You have shown endurance. You have shown courage. You have a spirit that cannot be broken." He paused, his gaze burning into her. "But the greatest trial still awaits." He took a step closer, his voice dropping to a low, intense whisper that only she could hear, but everyone understood. "Now do it with me." The desert night fell fast and hard, a cool blanket of stars thrown over the still hot earth. The Apache camp was a hive of frantic whispers. Kuchi's final challenge had ripped through the community, and no one knew what it meant. But Grace did. Those 5 words. "Now do it with me." It changed everything. This wasn't a trial anymore. This was something else. Something personal, something dangerous. She stood at the edge of the firelight, her body aching from the day's ordeal, her heart hammering against her ribs. The final trial wasn't another test of strength. It was an invitation to his lodge, to complete the sacred bonding ritual, to become his mate in the eyes of the spirits and his people. The scale of it was terrifying. If she said yes, there was no going back. She would be his, or she would be nothing. Cast out forever. A woman who had gambled everything and lost in the most intimate way possible. He appeared out of the darkness, as silent as a shadow. He had washed the war paint from his face. He wore no ornaments. He was just a man. But there was nothing simple about the raw power that radiated from him. His long black hair was loose, and in the moonlight, he looked like he was carved from the night itself. "You understand what I have offered," he said. It wasn't a question. His voice was low, for her ears only. "I understand the risk," she replied, her green eyes meeting his. "For both of us." He stepped closer, so close she could feel the heat coming off his skin, could smell the scent of sage and leather that was part of him. "My people are watching," he said. "Many of them are praying you will say no, that this madness ends now." "And what are you praying for?" What she whispered. His dark eyes searched her face, and she saw something in them that stole her breath. It wasn't just lust, it was uncertainty. For the first time, the legendary Coochies looked vulnerable. "I am praying," he said slowly, "that you are as strong as I think you are." He turned and walked toward his lodge. He didn't look back. He didn't have to. Grace followed him, each step taking her further away from her old life and deeper into a future she could not control. His lodge was bigger than she expected. It was the space of a warrior, but also of a leader. Buffalo robes covered the floor. Weapons and ceremonial shields hung on the walls, telling the story of his life, of his people. A small fire burned in the center, making the shadows dance. The air was thick with a heavy electric tension. "Grace," he said, his voice rougher than she'd ever heard it. "If this happens, everything changes. There is no going back." She turned to face him in the firelight, and she saw the truth of his words. This wasn't just about becoming his mate. This was about becoming a part of him, a part of his people. It was a leap into a fire that would either forge her into something new or burn her to ash. "I know," she said, moving toward him. "I've known since I first stepped into that circle that there was no going back for me." What happened next wasn't just passion. It was a collision. Two powerful forces, two proud souls, finally meeting their match. His hands came up to frame her face, his touch surprisingly gentle. His thumbs traced her cheekbones as if he were trying to memorize her. "You are not like any woman I have ever known," he murmured, his breath hot against her skin. "White or Apache?" "Heaven and you," she replied, her own hand sliding up his powerful chest, feeling the steady drum of his heart. "You are exactly what I expected you to be. Strong enough to break me, and wise enough not to." Their first kiss was not gentle. It was an explosion. It was the release of all the tension, all the fighting, all the challenges. It was recognition. It was two warriors finally laying down their arms. As they came together in the flickering light of the fire, Grace knew this was about more than love. It was about power. It was about claiming and being claimed. His touch was demanding, but it was also reverent. He was taking what he wanted, but he was worshiping what he had found. The night was endless. They spoke in whispers, a mix of Apache and English. They showed each other their scars, the marks left by their separate, brutal worlds. This was a joining of the spirit as much as the body. They were no longer the outcast and the war chief. They were just Grace and Kuchis. And in each other they found the missing part of their own souls. Dawn found them tangled together in the heavy buffalo robes, two bodies that had found their perfect rhythm. But the sound of voices outside the lodge shattered the peace. Reality came crashing back. Grace stirred in his arms, instantly aware of what was waiting for them. The trial was over, but the judgment was about to begin. "They are waiting," she whispered, tracing a line on his chest. His arms tightened around her. "Let them wait," he rumbled. "This is our time." But they both knew their private world was about to collide with the harsh judgment of the tribe. When they stepped out of the lodge, the entire settlement was there, a silent, waiting crowd. Grace walked beside him, her head high, her green eyes challenging anyone to question her. He had given her beads to braid into her auburn hair, and she wore a traditional Apache dress. She was no longer an outsider. Nalish was the first to approach. His face was a stone mask. He looked at Kuchis, then his eyes moved to Grace, and he studied her with the focused intensity of a warrior judging a new weapon. "The people are talking," he said finally, his voice flat. "Some say this is wrong, a break with tradition." "And what do you say, my friend?" Kuchis asked, his own voice quiet but filled with the authority of a leader. Nalish looked directly at Grace, and in his eyes she saw it. Respect. "I say," Nalish said, his voice ringing out for all to hear, "that any woman who can match the strength of Kuchis deserves to stand beside him, no matter the color of her skin." It was a beginning, but Grace knew it was just the first step on a long, hard road. Over the next months, Grace worked. She didn't just accept her new role, she earned it over and over again. She learned the intricate skills of the Apache women, the quiet knowledge of herbs and healing, the stories that held their culture together. She tended to the sick. She helped in the hunts. Slowly, painstakingly, she stopped being Kuchis's white woman and started becoming one of the people. The challenges came, just as they knew they would. Men from the government rode into their camp. They demanded Kuchi's surrender the white woman he held captive. They threatened war. Settlers from the nearby towns called her a traitor, a savage lover, and demanded she be rescued and returned to civilization, to be punished for her choices. Through it all, Grace and Kuchis stood as one. Their bond, forged in the fire of the trials, only grew stronger under the pressure. They faced down the government agents. They ignored the hatred of the settlers. They weathered the lingering doubts of the Apache traditionalists. One night, as they sat on a ridge overlooking the vast, star-dusted desert, he asked her the question that had been hanging between them. "Do you ever regret it? Giving up your world for this?" Grace was silent for a long time. She thought of the life she could have had, a safe life, a small life, a life in a cage with invisible bars. Then she looked at the man beside her, at the proud, free people she now belonged to, at the respect she had won with her own two hands. "The only thing I regret," she said finally, "is that it took me so long to find the courage to fight for what I really wanted." The seasons turned. Their love was fruitful. Grace gave birth to a son and then a daughter. They were beautiful children, with his strength and her fire, with her green eyes and his black hair. They were a bridge between two worlds. Grace, with her understanding of the white man's ways, became an invaluable advisor to Cooch's. She helped him negotiate treaties to find paths to peace where others saw only war. She had a unique voice, and both sides, however grudgingly, began to listen. The final test came 2 years later. The U.S. government offered Cooch's a reservation for his people in exchange for a final peace. It was a choice that would define their future forever. "What is your counsel?" he asked her one night in the privacy of their lodge. "My counsel," she said, "is that you are the leader of this people. You have never led them wrong. Trust yourself. Whatever you choose, I will face it with you." In the end, Coochis negotiated a deal that was seen as a miracle. He secured the right for his band to remain in their ancestral territory, a victory that would not have been possible without Grace's ability to navigate the treacherous world of the white man's politics. Years passed. The story of the great Apache war chief and his flame-haired white wife became a legend, a story told around campfires by Apache and settlers alike, a story of a love that had defied every law, every tradition, every boundary. Grace never forgot that first night, standing in the circle of stones, an outcast demanding a chance. But now, watching her children run and laugh in the sunset, she understood. Worthiness was never about passing someone else's test. It was about having the courage to set your own, the courage to be who you were meant to be. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the land they had fought so hard for, Coochis took her hand. "No woman passed the trials," he said softly, "their private ritual." "Until one did," she finished, smiling. But they both knew the truth. She hadn't passed his trials. She had shattered them. And in the wreckage, they had built a new world, a new life, a new legend. The desert wind carried the sound of their laughter into the darkness, a testament to a love that was stronger than hate, braver than fear, and as timeless as the ancient rocks that surrounded them. What would you have done? If you were Grace, would you have dared to risk everything for a chance to belong? And what about Cooch's? Was he right to defy his people's traditions for love, or was his first duty to the old ways? These are the questions that burn at the heart of a story like this. If you felt your own heart pounding during Grace's trials, if you felt the impossible tension when she stood against an entire tribe, then you understand the kind of stories we love to tell. We craft these journeys to make you feel, to make you question, to put you right in the middle of the fire. When you subscribe, you're not just hitting a button. You're casting a vote for stories with real courage, real stakes, and real heart. You're telling us you want more tales that aren't afraid to ask the hard questions. So if you believe in the power of a love that can change the world, hit that subscribe button and join our tribe. Because sooner or later, we all face our own trials. We all have to decide whether to follow the rules or to follow our hearts.